Welcome to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Portland District, virtual scoping meeting for the Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, for the NEXT Renewable Fuels Oregon project. Please note this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted to the Corps' website. Today's scoping meeting is an important part of the Corps' responsibilities under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. We value the public's input during the NEPA process. Thank you for your interest in the project and for taking the time to attend and participate in today's meeting. My name is Kate Mott, and I am the Corps' project manager for the NEXT Renewable Fuels Oregon LLC permit application. This meeting will provide information on the proposed project, it will provide an overview of the Corps' responsibilities under NEPA, and it will explain the NEPA scoping process. A representative from NEXT, the applicant, will also provide an overview of the proposed project. Lastly, we will collect and record oral comments for the scoping of the EIS. All comments, whether written or oral, will be considered equally. As a brief overview, the NEXT Renewable Fuels Oregon project is a proposal by NEXT Renewable Fuels Oregon LLC to construct and operate a renewable fuels facility at Port Westward in Columbia County, Oregon. The purpose of the proposed project is to produce renewable fuels for markets on the west coast of the United States. The image on the screen is a drawing that shows the layout of the proposed facility. The proposed project would be capable of producing 50,000 barrels per day of renewable diesel and other renewable fuel products. The production process would produce renewable fuels from a range of feedstocks, such as various vegetable oils, used cooking oil, animal tallow, and inedible corn oil. The facility would include various components such as storage tanks for feedstock and fuels, pipelines, refining units, an access road, a railroad spur, and railroad sidings. The project would rely on barges, ocean-going vessels, trains, and trucks, which would transport feedstock and the renewable fuels produced by the facility. The proposed project would permanently fill approximately 118 acres of wetlands and 1.8 acres of other waters. The project would also temporarily fill 32 acres of wetlands for a staging area during construction. To compensate for the wetland and water body losses, NEXT proposes to enhance 471.08 acres of nearby wetlands that are currently used for silviculture. The Portland District received an application from NEXT Renewable Fuels Oregon LLC for a Department of the Army permit to discharge, dredge, or fill material into waters of the United States. A Department of the Army permit is required for the project under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. The Corps' decision whether to issue or deny a permit will be based on an evaluation of the probable impacts, including cumulative impacts, of the proposed project. The Corps' evaluation will consider numerous public interest review factors, and our evaluation will balance the favorable impacts against the detrimental impacts that may occur. This is known as the Corps' public interest review. The Corps will also evaluate the project under the Clean Water Act Section 404b1 guidelines. The 404b1 guidelines are regulations published by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. In accordance with the guidelines, no discharge of dredged or fill material shall be permitted if there is a practicable alternative to the proposed discharge which would have less adverse impact on the aquatic ecosystem. The proposed project would discharge dredge or fill material into wetlands. The Corps will evaluate the proposed project and other alternatives to determine if the project, as proposed, is the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative. As a federal agency, the Corps must also determine if the proposed project is consistent with certain federal laws, such as the Endangered Species Act and the National Historic Preservation Act. NEXT submitted an initial permit application to the Corps in January 2021 and a revised application in July 2021. The revised application expanded the proposed project and proposed a compensatory wetland mitigation site south of the facility site. The Corps received the information necessary for a complete application on October 29, 2021. On November 5th, the Corps issued a public notice to solicit comments on the proposed project. All comments received in response to the public notice will be considered in this scoping process. In December, the Corps determined the proposed project may significantly affect the quality of the human environment and thus required an EIS. On May 10, 2022, the Corps published a Notice of Intent to Prepare an EIS in the Federal Register. This notice initiated the EIS process and officially started the 30-day scoping period. The Corps will accept scoping comments until the scoping period ends on June 9th. The Corps is the lead federal agency under NEPA for the preparation of the EIS. The Corps invited several federal and state agencies and tribes to participate as cooperating agencies in the preparation of the EIS. At this time, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is the only cooperating agency on the EIS. Under the current NEPA regulations, an applicant may prepare an EIS under the supervision of the lead federal agency. NEXT is preparing the EIS with their consultant, Stewardship Solutions Incorporated. As the lead federal agency, the Corps is responsible for the content, accuracy, and scope of the EIS. The Corps is also using a third-party contractor, SLR Consulting Limited, to provide the Corps technical assistance in the review of the EIS. SLR Consulting works at the sole direction of the Corps, but SLR services are paid for by NEXT. NEPA is a procedural statute intended to ensure federal agencies, such as the Corps, consider the environmental impact of their actions in the decision-making process. An EIS provides a full and fair discussion of the significant environmental impacts and informs decision-makers and the public of reasonable alternatives. The publication of the Notice of Intent to Prepare an EIS begins the scoping period. The purpose of the scoping period is to serve as a mechanism to solicit input on alternatives, identify significant issues to be analyzed in the EIS, and to ensure full and open participation in scoping for the draft EIS. Scoping allows the Corps to obtain input on the issues, alternatives, and any other factors you think should be included within the EIS. Scoping is intended to identify the significant environmental issues that warrant the most study and to identify insignificant issues that can be de-emphasized so as to narrow the analysis to those issues of genuine concern. Scoping comments need to be submitted to the Corps by June 9th, 2022. The objective of the scoping period is to hear from you. We need your input to identify project alternatives, resources to be considered, the breadth of environmental effects to be assessed, and new or unknown data or information sources. Your comments should be as specific as possible. Please focus your comments to those issues that you believe should be addressed in the EIS. The public will have an additional opportunity to comment when the draft EIS is published. Public participation is an important aspect of the NEPA process. Please visit our website to see the current status of the EIS process, to access notices, and to review the draft EIS when it becomes available. The preferred method for submitting comments is electronically. Please use the NEXT EIS email, which is nexteis@usace.army.mil, to submit comments or request to be added to the mailing list for the project. As the permit applicant, NEXT Renewable Fuels Oregon will now provide a short presentation on the proposed project. Please note, the Corps will complete an independent evaluation of the project. Views or opinions provided by NEXT are not representative of the Corps. Following the next presentation, we will accept oral scoping comments.
At NEXT, we're focused on leading the way in renewable fuels, starting right here in Oregon. Our goal is to provide clean, renewable fuel to fight the climate crisis and help create a healthier environment for all. Replacing fossil fuels is critical to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That's why federal and state laws mandate the transition to cleaner fuels, like renewable diesel. The EPA established the U.S. Renewable Fuel Standard, requiring refiners and importers to blend renewable fuels into petroleum diesel in an effort to curb transportation emissions. Oregon, California, and Washington have all also adopted state regulations requiring reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector. These policies are designed to decrease the carbon intensity of transportation fuel, reduce petroleum dependency, improve air quality, and provide an increasing range of low-carbon and renewable fuel alternatives. Just last year, the state of Oregon also created the Climate Protection Program, which aims to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions over the next 30 years. Each of these programs and policies share a critical goal: to collectively alter the path of climate change and improve public health by reducing the amount of carbon in our atmosphere. To support these efforts, NEXT plans to construct and operate a facility that produces renewable diesel. Renewable diesel is made from biomass and waste products like used cooking oil, animal tallows, and fish grease. And because it's made from biomass, renewable diesel is 60 to 80% cleaner than petroleum diesel and reduces the amount of harmful toxins that get into our air and water. This reduction leads to improved air quality from the moment it is used. In fact, it's anticipated that using NEXT renewable diesel will result in an annual reduction of more than 7 million tons of greenhouse gases. That's like taking 1 million cars off the road every year. Local leaders know that renewable fuels are vital to a cleaner transportation future. They also know about the significant economic benefits associated with the growing clean fuels industry in Oregon. Oregon Environmental Quality Director Richard Whitman wrote in The Oregonian, "In rural areas of Oregon, renewable fuels are a big part of a cleaner transportation future. Renewable fuels production and refining are burgeoning industries in Oregon, creating hundreds of new, high-paying jobs." And Metro President Lynn Peterson testified to the Oregon legislature that switching to renewable diesel was the single most impactful climate action that Metro could take to reduce emissions. At NEXT, we're focused on creating renewable diesel with a very low carbon footprint to help double up on those emissions savings. That's why our renewable diesel is made from would-be waste, like used French fry oil and fish grease. And because it works as an immediate and complete drop-in replacement for petroleum diesel, renewable diesel can be used in trucks, buses, trains, barges, farm and construction equipment, or any engine that currently uses petroleum diesel without having to make any upgrades or retrofits. As Joey Williams, manager of the vehicle fleet for the city of Oakland, said, "It was a seamless transition. You pick up a phone, place a call for renewable diesel, and you start using it that day." The NEXT facility will operate on 133 acres of industrial zoned land located within a public port. Our industrial property is adjacent to an ethanol plant, a liquid fuels terminal, agricultural operations, and 3 power plants. Utilities like water, electrical, and gas are already nearby, making our site shovel-ready. Core components of our facility include a new main access road, a rail branch line, product and feedstock tanks, a pretreatment plant, hydrogen processing equipment, 3 eco-fining units, a storm and process water system, administration buildings, and a laboratory. For the good of the planet and the longevity of our operations, NEXT is also committed to keeping our carbon intensity as low as possible throughout the life cycle of our product. But what does that mean? Carbon intensity measures how much carbon is released into the atmosphere per unit of energy consumed. Importantly, carbon intensity examines the life cycle of the fuel, the feedstock, production, mode of transportation, and use in vehicles. Ultimately, energy sources with low carbon intensity levels emit fewer greenhouse gases when they produce energy. That means we will use feedstocks with a low carbon intensity. When feedstock arrives at our facility, it goes through a pre-treatment process to remove impurities. Purified feedstock then enters a specialized eco-fining system that uses a hydrogen reactant to create clean, renewable diesel. That renewable diesel is then stored in tanks before being transferred to ships for delivery. At full operation, we will produce 50,000 barrels of renewable diesel per day. That's enough to transition the entire diesel demand in Oregon to greener, cleaner fuel. NEXT's feedstock will be supplied almost exclusively from marine vessels unloading at Port Westward's existing deep draft dock. Using existing shipping operations reduces impacts to rail and highway systems. However, we will still require some railcar service to the site. NEXT will primarily use rail cars to receive bleaching clay for the pretreatment process. In the event of maritime service interruption, rail access also provides an important emergency backup. Our dedicated branch line will split from Portland Western's A line and Port Westward's existing spur. NEXT has planned for adequate rail siding, which is necessary to meet logistical requirements of the rail providers. The facility is also designed with a number of secure entry points, but the majority of road access will come and go using Hermo Road, with emergency access available through Kolunki Road. Renewable diesel deliveries will be shipped up and down the West Coast, from Canada to Southern California. Public transit agencies like Portland's TriMet, LA's Metrolink, and Oakland's City Fleet have all begun replacing petroleum diesel with renewable diesel, and demand continues to grow. We want to help meet that demand while also further helping the unique ecosystems near our facility. The Oregon Department of State Lands analyzed potential impacts to wetlands, and in March 2022, the agency approved our mitigation plan to restore 471 acres of wetlands. This plan will turn a disused single-species tree farm into diverse habitat for local wildlife, plants, and pollinators. We will avoid negative impacts to the surrounding area and will construct meandering water channels to ensure appropriate water flow within the Beaver Drainage District. These restored wetlands will create natural groundwater filtration and help protect neighboring agricultural operations from flooding during storm events. For more information, please visit nextrenewables.com or email your questions to info@nextrenewables.com. Thank you.
This concludes the presentations on the EIS process and the project proposed by NEXT. The Corps included a presentation by NEXT as the project proponent. However, as a reminder, the Corps does not endorse or concur with the views, opinions, or testimonials provided by NEXT. The Corps will complete an independent evaluation of the proposed project subject to this permit application. We will now begin the oral comment period of this meeting. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak. If you finish early, we will move on to the next commenter. You may not transfer your speaking time to another participant. If you are still speaking after 3 minutes, we will mute your microphone. If you no longer wish to provide an oral comment, you may simply say pass, and we will move on to the next participant. Written comments and oral comments will be considered equally. We will begin with the registered speakers. Please listen for your name to be announced when it is your turn to speak. Begin by stating and spelling your name. If you are representing an organization, please say so at the beginning of the delivery of your public comments. For example, John Smith, JOHN-SMITH, representing organization name. If you wish to comment and you are not registered, use the chat feature to message our meeting moderator. They will confirm your request. Then simply wait for your name to be announced, accept the option to unmute yourself, and deliver your comments. If you are participating by phone and are not registered, press *9 to request commenting time. Listen for the last 4 digits of your phone number to be announced, press *6 to unmute, and deliver your comments. To avoid feedback when speaking, we suggest turning off your computer audio. Use of inappropriate language, personal attacks, or profanity will not be tolerated. Continued use of inappropriate language will require us to end your speaking time and move on to the next commenter. As mentioned before, please listen for your name, accept the option to unmute yourself, state and spell your first and last name, and state if you are representing an agency or organization. The timer will start when you begin to provide your comments. Please focus your scoping comments on those issues that should be analyzed in the EIS. If you have any questions, visit our website at the web address below. As mentioned earlier, you may submit written comments until June 9th, 2022, and will have an additional opportunity to provide comments when the draft EIS is published. Aaron Bragg of SLR Consulting will now lead the comment portion of this meeting.
Good afternoon. As the presentation just referenced, I'm Aaron Bragg with SLR and will be moderating today's comment portion of the meeting. Also online are 5 members of the Army Corps of Engineers Portland District Office. I will call the commenter up and the following commenter to keep our process orderly and moving forward. If you encounter technical difficulties trying to unmute your mic, we will move on to the next speaker and return to you after for another try. We will stick to the 3-minute allotted comment time and mute your mic when the timer has reached the limit on the screen. Please forgive me for any mispronunciations of names. Our first commenter is Blaine Ackley, followed by Theodora Songus. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Blaine Ackley, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Blaine Ackley, B-L-A-I-N-E, Ackley, A-C-K-L-E-Y. Thank you for allowing me time to speak about the scope of the review required for Next Energy's Port Westward project. I have already submitted written testimony, so I won't repeat those points I raised in that testimony. I would like to take this opportunity to suggest that this project must be considered in relation to our global climate crisis. I don't think it is wise to invest in any fossil fuel derived project at this time when we're going to be reducing our dependence on fossil fuels by the year 2035. Therefore, the no build alternative should be included as an alternative for the review in this process. Secondly, the rail shipment of gas and oil has inherent dangers for the environment, the Columbia River, and the communities that the rail line travels through. This issue has been studied frequently in past applications for oil and coal projects along the river. And if you look at those, you'll find that rail has a possibility of accidents about 1 every year. That's not acceptable. Finally, the Columbia River is home to many endangered and ESA listed species, including salmon, steelhead, lamprey eel, smelt, and there are bird species to consider as well. The next project will have an impact on all these endangered species. Any dredging required for ships to land at the facility, and also the increasing ship traffic along the river provides an opportunity for accidents, groundings, and subsequent release of the oil into the environment. This should be a full and complete process. Remember, the tribes have to be included in this too. The tribes have, by treaty, rights to fish and hunting in their usual play and accustomed places in perpetuity. We would be violating those treaties for the land we took from those tribes if we do nothing and allow this project to proceed. In closing, thank you for allowing me to participate in this hearing. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you for your comments. We will now move on to Theodora Songus, who will be followed by Janet Alt. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Theodora Songus, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization. All right, we will now move on to Janet Alt, who will be followed by Brad Biddle. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Janet Alt, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization.
Good afternoon. My name is Janet Alt, J-A-N-E-T-A-U-L-T. I'm part of the Great Vow Zen Monastery community and resided there for years. The monastery sits directly across the road from NEXT's proposed refinery and rail yard. I support the Corps' decision to conduct a full environmental impact statement and strongly urge you to take a hard and in-depth look at all the direct, indirect, and especially cumulative impacts this massive refinery, rail yard, dock, and all connected actions would have on our community and far beyond. This project would have major and irreversible impacts to the entire lower Columbia River and would significantly endanger our ability to serve the wide network of people from all over the country who visit and live at the monastery every year. We're relying on you to ensure every risk is assessed and every alternative considered. I urge the Corps to assess strong alternatives in design and location that would have fewer impacts, including looking into electrolytic hydrogen, as well as the globally agreed upon path of vehicle electrification, rather than so-called bridge fuels that keep us locked into fossil fuels longer than we can afford. NEXT's proposal uses significant amounts of fracked gas. Please carefully consider those consequences on top of all the carbon dioxide, methane, and other pollution emitted from the rail yard and refinery itself, which would be one of the largest single emitters in Oregon. I urge you to consider all the impacts of traffic, noise, air pollution, and odor that would severely compromise the mission of one of few residential Buddhist training monasteries in the country. Please consider the risks associated with diesel, chemical, or feedstock spills into water at the site amid wetlands and prime agricultural land upon which local communities depend, as well as all along the rail lines, highways, and waterways where materials are shipped in and out. How would the refinery, its pollution, and its spill risks fit into the Corps' regional approach to salmon recovery and restoration? What would happen in the event of a major earthquake in this area of liquefiable soil, which we all know can come at any moment? Finally, NEXT is not committing to one source of feedstocks, but 100% will be supplied by the fossil fuel mammoth BP, which has one of the worst environmental records in the industry. Different feedstocks change the carbon intensity of renewable diesel and pollution impacts at the facility. Further, please consider the differences in carbon intensity, land use, and environmental justice implications among sourcing potential feedstocks, including impacts to food systems and especially the far-reaching impacts of purpose-grown seed oils and the most often unsustainable agricultural practices used to produce them. Conventional agriculture rarely preserves soil carbon balances and adds to the CO2 problem because of damage to soil health, failure to assure sustainable regrowth of the fuel stock, synthetic fertilizers, and a host of other impacts. Thank you very much for your time and for considering these comments.
Thank you for your comments. We will now move on to Brad Biddle, who will be followed by Jim Hoffman. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Brad Biddle, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization.
Thank you. My name is Brad Biddle, B-R-A-D, B as in boy, I, D as in David, L-E. I am an attorney here in Oregon, but I'm not representing any client or organization. I'm really engaged from personal interest that's driven by 3 main factors. One is a longstanding interest in sustainable biofuels. I was the founder of a now defunct nonprofit called the Desert Biofuels Initiative that was in Phoenix, Arizona, and we did a series of research projects that I'll reference in a moment. I'm also the co-founder of a cold water swimming group called the Broughton Beach Hyenas. We swim in the Columbia River year-round. I was the first person in Oregon to swim Ice Mile, recognized by the International Ice Mile Association, which was a mile in the river in a regular swimsuit when 37 degrees Fahrenheit water temperature. And I also was a resident at Great Vale Zen Monastery, which would be, as mentioned earlier, impacted significantly by air quality, noise, and other issues. I've spent many hours in and at the water directly downstream from the proposed facility. I'm hoping to make 3 substantive points today. One is I encourage the Corps to be highly skeptical of any claims that waste vegetable oils will be a significant feedstock source for this facility. There is relatively little waste vegetable oil that exists in the world relative to fuel demands, and there are already significant markets for it. And generally, it's uneconomical to collect much of the waste vegetable oil that exists. Part of the study that we did in connection with Arizona State University focused on the Phoenix, Arizona area found that just even if every drop of waste vegetable oil in the region was collected, it would replace just 5% of the diesel use in the Phoenix area. So I do think that any claim that WVO will be a significant feedstock source is wrong. I encourage the Corps to assume that agricultural feedstocks will be used and to include a broad assessment of the environmental impacts of the use of those kinds of feedstocks, particularly how those feedstocks can increase greenhouse gas emissions due to disturbing soil, use of fertilizers, increase water pollution, decrease aquifers, and ultimately raise food prices. And finally, I encourage the Corps to very carefully assess the specific chemicals that will be used in the trans-esterification process. We were struck by the reality that while biofuel has relatively benign inputs and relatively benign outputs, the process involves very dangerous chemicals, including caustic soda, caustic potash, methanol, methoxide, that are difficult to store, difficult to manage. They can cause fires, and leakage into the river would be a disaster. So thank you for the opportunity to share these points, and I encourage the Corps to do a very broad analysis of the environmental issues. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We will now move on to Jim Hoffman, who will be followed by Nancy Conover. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Jim Hoffman, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization.
Thank you. My name is Jim Hoffman, Jimhoffmann. I'm with Hopville Farms in a 125-acre organic blueberry farm located about a mile away from the proposed site. I don't see the clock going, so I want to make sure you hear me. Okay. It's Jim Hoffman, Hoffmann, with Hopville Farms. So my comment that I would like to the record is that this project would irreparably harm our irrigation sources for our organic blueberry farm. And the compromise to the water sources would compromise our food safety. I think that the presentation given at the beginning of this forum, highlights the importance of a full environmental impact analysis being required, because of all the industrial facilities cited, only Port Westward had a full review, environmental review, by the Oregon Department of Energy and the Oregon Siting Council. Despite this being a $2 billion project, this will not be reviewed by any state agency in any comprehensive way. And the Pacific Biorefinery was quickly switched over to diesel and gas and fracked oil. And so when we review this project, it has to be reviewed in the context that it may not end up being clean diesel. It could be sold tomorrow as regular diesel, and we'll be stuck with it. The issue is hydrology. The sponsors incorrectly, and the port incorrectly, calls this a 400-acre project or 133-acre project. The impact on this project is not to adjoining landowners, it's to the entire 5,700-acre beaver drainage district. As we all know, we're hemmed in by levees, and the hydrology is all connected. And we pull our irrigation water out of the sloughs that these folks will use as their stormwater runoff. There's no possibility of retaining the stormwater runoff in this area on site. And the increases in building up these facilities several feet above flood stage will only serve to increase the flooding of our fields. It'll increase the velocity of the water. It'll increase sedimentation, and the channeling that they're talking about blocking and adding to and pooling is going to create huge problems for water quality, sediment, the transfer of hydrocarbon, pollution, salt, metals. to our field because they'll flood onto our field, end up on our field and in our fruit. So this all needs to be analyzed in whole, in total. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We will now move on to Nancy Conover. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Nancy Conover, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization. That concludes our registered speakers. We will now move on to the attendees who have requested to speak via the chat feature. Again, if you have dialed in by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand if you would like to speak. We will now move on to Paul Vogel, who will be followed by Wendy Schmidt. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Paul Vogel, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization.
My name is Paul Vogel, Paulvogel, the Executive Director and speaking for the Columbia Economic Team, Columbia County. Our team is comprised of every local government jurisdiction as well as private businesses throughout Columbia County. We support the NEXT Renewables project on the basis of economic, social, and environmental benefit as overwhelmingly net positive and cost beneficial, which the Corps of Engineers must take into account in the siting of this project at Port Westward. The community around NEXT proposed site is a low-income rural community that suffered economically far too long. The area is topographically and geographically challenged, lagging behind in all terms of median household income, unemployment, and cumulative negative effects that poverty and lack of economic diversity all have on a community. Population, economic, and job growth in North County have been stagnant or declining for decades. Millions have been invested in the infrastructure of Port Westward to encourage industrial development, jobs, and economic growth. Port Westward is this area's economic future and is its employment lands. NEXT Renewables aligns well with the port's other industrial tenants at Port Westward. The public dock has excess capacity to handle significant additional waterborne commerce and economic efficiency on a federally authorized channel. Project will generate total local economic opportunities and create and sustain jobs, more than 3,500 during construction, more than 240 permanent manufacturing jobs in the community. Manufacturing is important here. The manufacturing sector and workforce are the state's regional economic priority for this area. Manufacturing has the highest multiplier effect of any economic sector, nearly 3 to 1 for every dollar invested. Growing this industry will lead to long-term, well-paying jobs and job training in clean fuels, support all aspects of local business, generate traded sector economic multipliers throughout our region. Rarely is a new manufacturer so aligned with Oregon's environmental, social, and economic public policy priorities. It's a complete alignment with and supportive of Oregon's low carbon fuel standards, Clean Air Oregon standards, as well as economic development priority for creating traded sector employment. The environmental benefits of the project are well documented, not the least of which is the creation of significant 4 to 1 wetlands already permitted by DSL, your coordinating state agency. A full carbon emissions life cycle analysis demonstrates the NEXT Renewables project operates a net positive benefit, and progressive adoption of clean fuel standards throughout the country makes it economically sustainable. In short, the millions in taxes will support the social fabric and the essential social services in the region. And we believe that in assessing all of these, all of the impacts per year charge, the benefits are net positive. And we thank you for the opportunity to comment and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. We will now move on to Wendy Schmidt, who will be followed by Mike Bridges. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Wendy Schmidt, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization.
My name is Wendy Schmidt, WENDY-SCHMIDT. I represent myself. Thank you to the Corps. Is this working?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you to the Corps for opening up this hearing to public comment. I live in the Beaver Drainage District. I actively farm on my land. I am pro-union and I come from a long line of proud union workers. But this hearing is not about jobs and how great biofuel is in my tank. It is about assessing risk in building and maintaining a fuel facility. The intended site for the next fuel facility is within the Beaver Drainage District and is governed by the laws of the state of Oregon. In accordance with those laws, the purpose of a drainage district is to maintain and protect the land within the district for sanitary and agricultural purposes for public health. The proposed site is on the Columbia River Basin, one of the largest watersheds in our nation. A watershed is naturally designed to slow, clean, filter, and store water. A watershed is wetlands. The planned site for the next facility is approximately 10 feet above sea level with no bedrock. The facility will have a number of buried tanks containing caustic chemicals. These chemicals are extremely toxic and water soluble. There is no safe level. Buried tanks have a great potential to leak toxins into the groundwater. Currently, according to the EPA, there's about 680,000 underground storage tanks leaking toxic chemicals into groundwater within the United States. Looking at the impact of demolition of the current watershed, wetlands, trees, soil, and wildlife, the construction of a facility driving 15,200 16-inch, 90 feet long steel pipes into a concrete slurry, building an extension to the natural gas line, constructing a railway, installing multiple holding tanks, and importing all other building supplies to the site. On top of exuding noxious and poisonous gases, emissions from the rail system, tankers, commercial trucks, and cars, all in the production of 50,000 barrels a day of renewable fuel. Isn't the purpose of building this facility to reduce carbon emissions and greenhouse gases? Building and running a facility of this size and nature will emit an exorbitant amount of greenhouse gases, VOC particles, and other toxic gases. By constructing this facility within the Beaver Drainage District, not just our community is put at risk, but also multiple communities in neighboring states along the Great Columbia River. I ask you to consider all impacts this facility will have on our land, water, and air by doing a Section 408 review. The land in question and the nature of this facility is not just about filling wetlands for construction. It's about the engineering, environmental, and public concerns related to the impact of this project. Is this really the best use for our land?
Thank you for your comments. We will now move on to Mike Bridges, who will be followed by Jasmine Liliach. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Mike Bridges, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Bridges, MIKEBRIDGES, and I'm representing the Longview-Kelso Building and Construction Trades Council as the current president. Myself and other affiliates of our council represent thousands of building trades men and women in Oregon and Southwest Washington, including Columbia County. The next renewable diesel project at Port Westward is exactly the right project at exactly the right place. And frankly, I'd say it's coming at exactly the right time as well, but honestly, I feel it's actually long overdue. That's why I'm here today to encourage the Army Corps of Engineers to consider all angles and the benefits, not just the environmental benefits as you move through the EIS process, and please move through it with urgency. We know that creating a green economy that prioritizes solutions to the climate crisis is essential, and we hope to keep our special planet livable. That's why it's important that we have prioritize projects like this that marry both environmental and economic benefits. The green jobs that this will bring to Columbia County are in the thousands, from construction jobs to skilled labor that will run the facility itself once established. This renewable diesel facility has the ability to fundamentally shift our region for the better and towards a sustainable future on many fronts. Good union jobs with family wages, cleaner fuels with environmental benefits galore, and the multitude of positive economic benefits cannot be ignored. Neither can NEXT commitments to the community from an educational standpoint, as well as an ecosystem diversity standpoint with the wetland restoration project. Let's support Oregon and its mission to reduce carbon emissions while also supporting Oregonians getting into careers that will support families and encourage economic growth. As you review this project for the EIS, I urge you to consider the positive impacts on workforce development, economic development, and as well as the long-term environmental benefits it will bring now and into the future for Columbia County and beyond. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this amazing opportunity.
Thank you for your comments. We will now move on to Jasmine Lilich, who will be followed by Tony Hyde. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Jasmine Lilich, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization.
Hi there, my name is Jasmine Lilich, Jasmine Lillich. I'm 5th generation resident of Clatskanie, and I'm just a small farmer here and a small food processor. Projects like NEXT Renewable's proposal should never be sited along any river, especially the Columbia River, one of the world's most powerful waterways and the heart of a massive watershed that feeds our Pacific Ocean and supports millions of humans and countless wild and farm species. This water is too important to gamble with. Already our waters are far too contaminated. Ask the local watershed council who just completed comprehensive testing. Keystone species, which are federally protected, are dying off in droves, impacting species elsewhere in the food chain, including us. Severe levels of pollution and toxins are present in human tissues and mother's breast milk. So instead of obsessing about jobs and money and thinking that will somehow make life better, humans should be taking a hard look at how we consume energy, cutting back, cutting waste, and considering how to live a more humble life that respects the biological boundaries of the planet we depend on. This project is not green, no matter how NEXT spins it. The agricultural industry that would underpin this project is known to be one of the largest emitters on the planet and contributes to land use changes that replace vital, productive ecosystems with toxic, destructive monoculture. This, in fact, is not considered in the life cycle analysis or carbon intensity scoring. Additionally, the impacts of pesticides on soil life and carbon sequestration, as well as the contamination of waterways and the poisoning of flora and fauna sustained in and by those waterways, are severely underregulated and dismissed. For proponents who think this project is renewable, sustainable, or beneficial in any way, I encourage you to dig deeper and take a harder look. Next project as proposed would be a net detriment to the environment despite their mesmerizing surface level sales pitch. Your EIS needs to begin local with the immediate implications and continue extrapolating. Only then can anyone actually say we are addressing the global crisis of climate change. Furthermore, it is troubling that the DEQ is failing to consider idling boats and trains on which this project is dependent in the total cost accounting of their air quality permit assessment, especially because proposed emissions are just under Title V regulation. It is highly suspicious to negate such a paramount aspect of this project that would contribute a significant amount of emissions, requiring a stricter level of regulation. It is also suspect and concerning that DEQ is not considering the wastewater discharge zone into the Columbia River. DEQ claims this would be monitored under the Port of Columbia County's permit, an organization with a history of polluting the Columbia River and forcing DEQ cleanups. On that note, considering both the Port and NEXT have a history of big messes requiring government cleanup and tax dollars, it should be noted there is a higher risk of environmental damage with the management involved in this proposal, especially considering NEXT and their lawyers just discovered the presence of vital levee structures neighboring their proposed site. I encourage the Army Corps to take this opportunity to lead by example, protect the people who depend on your diligence, and save the environment from greenwashed projects like NEXT Renewable's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We will now move on to Tony Hyde. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Tony Hyde, please unmute yourself, state your name, spell it for the record, and state if you are representing an organization.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Hyde, Tonyhyde. I've been a resident of Columbia County for over 50 years. In that time, I've served in the capacity of a city councilor, mayor of Vernonia, a county commissioner for 20 years. I also sat on the State Economic Development Commission for almost a decade. I currently sit on the executive board of Columbia County's Economic Development Team. Projects of this magnitude deserve thoughtful assessment and review and dedicated time for input from the community. I appreciate that this is being done here. However, given the rampant misinformation spread by project opponents and complete lack of facts and evidence to support their claims, I urge the Army Corps of Engineers to commit to the federal regulations outlined under NEPA, which are clearly spelled out. I encourage the Army Corps of Engineers to take a streamlined approach to the EIS as is prudent and regulated. During the review, please stick to the project's actual distinct footprint and ensure that extraneous issues are not folded into your assessment to placate NIMBY-rooted opponents. We deserve clean, renewable fuels and have a true opportunity to make them in Oregon with NEXT. A robust review is needed, but a robust review that goes outside the bounds of the project is simply unwarranted. Please do not use this EIS to slow the momentum on a much needed clean fuels project in Columbia County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. There are no remaining speakers. The comment period remains open until June 9th. You can submit them via the email on screen or leave a recorded message at 503-808-4041. Thank you for your attendance and input. Have a great rest of your day.